Hello, my name's Carwyn Jones, and welcome to this series of podcasts where I talk to the movers and shakers in the Welsh business community. What was their journey, what are they doing now, and what are the challenges for the future for them, their sector, and for Wales? And I'm joined today by Cerys Furlong, who is the CEO at Chwarae Teg and also part owner of 3 restaurants in Cardiff. Cerys, you're very welcome indeed.
Nice to be here.
Now, your journey saw you starting off in the art scene, onto various organisations such as ACT Training. You were an assistant director at the Open University, and then of course came to Chwarae Teg. But tell us a bit about the things you did before you arrived at Chwarae Teg.
Yeah, so I never intended really to come back to Wales. I went to university in Bristol, having grown up just outside of Cardiff. But once devolution was really happening, it just seemed like such an exciting opportunity for anybody who had an interest in kind of public life, social policy, which is what my background, academic kind of interest had been in, to come back and try and get a job. So I fell into a role really. It could have been anything in the charitable sector, but I ended up working in lifelong learning. And really became incredibly passionate about that. So I worked for a long time around education and skills, and saw the impact that had on transforming people's lives and opportunities. And that really was what got me passionate about working in Wales and the difference that we could make in a small nation where you could really make those connections between organisations and people, and those with influence and responsibility. So I suppose I kind of worked my way through various organisations in the education and skills field before finding, like many women my age, I'm in my unfortunately late 30s now, and
I'll swap with you, if that's all right.
And I'd had my first child by then, and having thought that you just sail through life with no kind of barriers, and I was naturally quite eager to get on in my career, but I found suddenly that taking time out for maternity leave, you did get a bit leapfrogged, and I looked around and thought, the opportunities that I thought were there are not quite as straightforward. So I found myself, talking a bit more about equality, a bit more about injustice and social justice. And so, to cut a long story short, by the time the job at Chwarae Teg came up, I thought that is an opportunity to bring everything that I'm passionate about together. And
you were also the director for Wales for the Learning and Work Institute. What did that involve?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting organisation. It's been around, and its predecessor organisation, the National Institute for Adult Continuing Education, for over 100 years. And lots of incredible things spun out of Learning and Work Institute, British Film Institute, Basic Skills Agency. And so that was working across England and Wales, but I was the director for Wales, and trying to encourage government to think about not just education as being something that young people were able to access, and trying to open people's eyes to the fact that lots of people need second chances, and we can't just design systems in public policy that are kind of one size fits all, and if you fall off the treadmill and if you don't succeed first time, that's your chance, sorry. And so adult education is really important to offer that second chance.
And you became the Chief Executive of Chwarae Teg in February of 2017. A lot of our listeners will have heard of Chwarae Teg perhaps, but they don't know exactly what Chwarae Teg does. So tell us a bit about Chwarae Teg as an organisation.
It's honestly the best organisation I've ever worked for. It's been around for 27 years now. First coordinator was Jane Hutt, and it was really established to provide support to women who were facing barriers to get back into the employment market. So that was very practical in the early days around providing childcare. Now what we do is much broader. We work across Wales. We've got about 85 staff, and we do 3 main things really. We work directly with women, so improving their confidence, skills and experience so that they can boost their career potential. We want them to get pay rises. We want them to accelerate their career journey. And then we work directly with businesses and organisations to look at their culture and how they operate. Are they embracing flexible working, agile working? Are they looking to the future at what their workforce is going to need? And how can we make them better places for everybody to work, but particularly understanding the barriers that women face? So can they become better places to attract women into work, to retain them and progress them to the highest levels? And then underpinning all of that really is the research and the policy work we do, looking internationally at what the best practice is to inform the delivery that we do. So we do a lot of work with government and with the public sector around understanding their needs and how organisations like us can best support them.
You mentioned there about the feeling you had about being leapfrogged, and I remember when I came out of university, I went to train as a barrister, and then people would look for pupilages, as they were called, placements basically within barristers' chambers, and it wasn't uncommon in those days for young women to be asked, well, are you going to have children? As if that was a problem.
Yeah.
Well, you won't be here then all the time, so you won't be able to contribute as much to chambers. Is it still that obvious and upfront, or is it now more hidden, that kind of discrimination against women in the workplace?
I mean, on the positive side, things have definitely got better. For many women in many workplaces, they're doing things that 20 or 30 years ago would never have been possible. And juggling having a family and being a professional in whatever your career is now possible for most women. However, having said that, there are a lot of instances and a lot of women experience outright and direct discrimination as a result of being a woman and as a result of being a mother. There's no avoiding that. My view has always been educate businesses, educate employers, rather than hammer them over the head necessarily with legislation or bad press. Let's take them on this journey, because it's not about us saying, look, we're just campaigning for equality for the sake of it. We're trying to convince them, based on the evidence that we see and know, that this is good for their business. And I think if you approach it in that way, you can usually move people some way along. You can move the dial a bit. So you might be the best employer in the world, but you've still got to look ahead to the next 10 years. How's that future workforce going to look, and what more could you be doing? Or you could be the worst employer in the world, and it's taking those initial baby steps. We need to be open to have that conversation with everybody. Otherwise, some industries, sectors, and some people are going to get left behind.
I've been struck by the number of young women who've said to me, they're mid-late 30s, they want to have children. They haven't at that stage, but they're high flyers in their careers, ambitious, and they almost feel as if they would be judged if they have children. Well, why aren't they properly committed to the job in a way that no man would ever be? Is that something you've come across?
Yeah, I think that does still exist in a lot of workplaces. And the problem is that we measure success by people's time in work, perhaps, or their presenteeism, rather than what they achieve and what the impact of what they do is. The way that we work and the way we try to encourage other businesses to work is focus on the outcomes that somebody is able to deliver to your business, not how they do it.
I mean, it started in the 80s, this sort of macho approach that the longer you're in work, the better it looks for your career prospects. But you've touched on productivity there. It's not the number of hours you work, it's what you do with your time. Why is it that a German worker is twice as productive as a British worker, even though Germany has far more public holidays than the UK does? And I think that's something that we've lost. It came from North America originally, that it's not all about 14, 15 hours a day in work if you're ambitious, because that doesn't make you a better person in terms of what you produce.
Absolutely. And, I can tell you that the environment that we work in now is the most productive place that I've ever worked, and we don't have any set hours. We set objectives for our staff, and as long as they deliver them, we trust them to do that in a way that's suitable around their other commitments. And you might say, well, that's all very well because you're a sort of fluffy third sector organisation, but we work with all sorts of other organisations to introduce that kind of model. And so just to give you a couple of examples, DVLA, huge employer in Swansea, we started to introduce this kind of agile working in some of their teams. And these were very much presentee culture, where they had a set number of targets to achieve in the day, but they were also expected to work set hours. So they would just the staff would spread those targets across the day. Once you lifted that set hours thing, took that out of the equation and said, look, as a team, this is what we've got to deliver this week. We all know you've got different priorities. You might have a sports day, you might have to take somebody to an appointment. You work out how you're going to deliver that. And what they noticed was that team working, to start with, went through the roof because people were looking after each other and looking out for each other. It became more efficient because whilst they were talking about that, they were saying, well, hang on, we're both doing the same thing here. That's duplication. Let's see if we can find a more streamlined way. And also, the biggest impact that employers report to us is a massive reduction in short-term sickness because people don't need to take it. Because when they need to take a break, they can take it as long as they get their work done around that. And the other example I really like is Joe's Ice Cream. So we worked with Joe's Ice Cream and they were expanding. It's a really good family business in Wales. And they were looking at increasing their office space to accommodate the number of staff that they needed. And through introducing a more flexible way of working, they didn't have to spend that money. They were thinking about spending up to £1 million in their expansion plans. And actually through introducing a different way of working where staff could flex their hours, it meant that they didn't have to be all present during the same core hours at the same time, requiring a desk each. And that's just more efficient, more effective, better for the business, better for the individuals. So we've got to just be open, I think, to thinking about, yes, of course we want to improve productivity. We can do that and improve our employees' experience of work. And then they're more loyal to you, more committed to the business. So it seems to me a bit of a no-brainer.
You also spent time, of course, as a councillor on Cardiff Council and finished in 2013. A job that's very much full on, no set hours, as we both know. What was that experience like, and why was it that you decided to move on?
It was an incredibly positive experience on the whole. Local government is, I think, the best place to experience earlier in your career, because if you're interested in public policy, you see the whole breadth of what can be achieved, good, bad and ugly. And it enabled me to look at across the capital city things like the local development plan, things like how we transform education or social services. You could really make a difference in those aspects, and I really enjoyed that. I can't say I was the biggest fan of being a local councillor, and I did find it difficult, being with my kids in the park and people would come up to you and complain about things, and I understand that, but I think there was the thing that never sat quite comfortably with me was the way that people felt that they owned every part of you, and it was very hard to escape. And I think, I had my first child when I was a councillor, and, that was really difficult because I was working full time, being a councillor, had a young family. She used to come to meetings. The council wasn't really set up to accommodate that, and very few people, I think, very few women had children in the council prior to me. And so when I asked about what happens when I go on maternity leave, it was a series of blank faces. I knew I wasn't going to do it forever. And I think I knew once I got offered a job in the cabinet, and I decided to decline it because I didn't think I could do that and do my job, and I wasn't prepared to give up my job. And I probably knew at that point that the writing was on the wall in terms of the end of my council career. So when I got a job at the Learning and Work Institute as the Director for Wales, I thought, this is probably the time to step out and let somebody else have a go. But it was a really positive experience. There's so much to do. There's so much to do to encourage more different people into local government. And I'm pleased to see in places like Cardiff, they've been quite successful at that. But, across the whole of Wales, as a whole, we've got a long, long way to go. Only 28% of councillors are women.
Yeah, I became a councillor when I was 28 back in 1995, and I was the youngest on the authority by 10 years. And most of them were much, much older than me. And of course, the way the council operated was that the meetings were all held in the day. Now, because I was self-employed, I could do it, but if I'd have been in any job, there's no way I could have been a councillor. If I'd had any child caring responsibilities, there's no way it could have happened. So that was an issue certainly at the time, and obviously something that you faced as well. Chwarae Teg, Chief Executive, but also the part owner of a number of restaurants. So tell us about that side of your life.
Yeah, this is the bit where my husband gets cross because he says, you talk about it like you do all the work, but I'm the one behind the stove every day. So my husband's a chef, and when we moved back to Cardiff, we used to get frustrated that there weren't the kind of places to go out. We liked to go out for a meal. We liked to go to the pub with our friends, family, and that there weren't the kind of places that we wanted to go. And so we used to have these sort of long chats as a group of us. Oh, one day we'll open our own restaurant. Wouldn't it be wonderful? The kind of thing you dream about. And we've been really fortunate that we've had the opportunity to actually do it. So back when I was a councillor, I think, we got to know a business guy in Cardiff who had some premises that he wanted to show us around. He said, I heard you guys are looking to open your own restaurant. We had tried to buy our own place just before the financial crash, but our funding was withdrawn as sort of first-time entrepreneurs. And so we went into partnership and opened the Potted Pig in Cardiff, which just became this huge success. And it blew us away, really. And from there, we thought, okay, well, there's an opportunity to make a positive difference here, not just in terms of the business that we want to run and the impact that can have on us and our lives, but employing people in a way where they feel part of something special, where they're well rewarded for what they do, where we give them decent terms and conditions and time off, and all those things that were really important to us. But also, it was very much driven by high quality ingredients, fresh produce from Wales and as near to Wales as we can get it. And so it just really happened organically, and there was never a great master plan. There was a period where I think we opened something like 5 venues in 5 years. And at that point, I'd just had my second child, and it started to feel like something that we were losing control of, that we there was a risk that we were losing sight of the values that we started out with, which was, we're passionate about this. My husband wanted to work in the industry that he wanted to work in, but be master of our own destinies. But we didn't set out to open a chain of 5 or 6 or 7 venues. And once you do that, it can be quite difficult to hold on to the initial premise that you started out with. So about 2 years ago, just before I joined Chwarae Teg, we sort of consolidated our businesses, parted company with our original business partners, and decided to focus on the 3 venues that were ours. So my husband and I, my brother-in-law, now run Milkwood in Pontcanna, and the Grange in Grangetown, and the Lansdowne in Canton. And I think that's enough for anyone.
Yes, you had 2 branches of Porro as well, didn't you?
We did.
That's right.
At one stage, yeah. And I think it felt it. We've been talking about this as a family recently, how the landscape was changed in terms of the food and drink sector. And if you think about Cardiff over the last 5-10 years, we had this huge transformation of big chains, people opening in Cardiff as their first city outside of London, many examples of that. And then a feeling at the moment that maybe that bubble's burst. And if you read the industry press around restaurants and hospitality, and I've been doing that for many years, you'll see that these fast expanding chains, the idea that actually made us feel uncomfortable about opening more and more and more, have started to have their fingers burnt. And what I want to see is a more thriving independent sector where there's more small groups that are maybe opening 2 or 3 venues that are sustainable, that can provide job security for people in the local economy for a long time, that retain their core values, but are able to be successful businesses, but without necessarily being of the boom and bust variety, which is not helpful for our high streets, it's not helpful for the staff employed, it's not helpful for the people who own the business.
You mentioned the way that the sector's changed over the years. I mean, we are sitting now, to give our listeners just an idea of where we are. We're in the Brewery Quarter in Cardiff. Around the corner is Caroline Street. And Caroline Street is known as Chippy Alley. I think it's called Chippy Alley on the Cardiff Monopoly Board, actually. And what's been intriguing over the years is to see that change. We still have the chip shops there, of course, but to see restaurants arriving in what was traditionally, the heart of Cardiff's takeaway land. And the way that's changed. Pontcanna, of course, the way that's changed over many years. And do you feel you've been part of engineering that change?
Yeah, I mean, I always feel a bit uncomfortable about taking credit for these things, but I have always thought that I'd love to see one of those kind of moving heat maps of Cardiff. and how the centre of gravity of the city and the various industries within it have emerged and moved over time. And when I think back to when we opened the Potted Pig here in St Mary Street, the road had only just been pedestrianised. It was full of stag and hen do's, and we had to have security on the door. It's transformed at that end of High Street now. It's full of cocktail bars, restaurants. It's a real kind of foodie mecca, and we certainly wouldn't take credit for that, but we were at the beginning of that starting journey. And I think when somebody is seen to succeed, then others have more confidence to join them. And that, we shouldn't be too humble about taking some pride in that as well. With the pubs, it's slightly different. I think our drive there was absolutely to open a successful business, but it was also about regeneration, because we are passionate kind of real ale pub goers who like a proper pub with some bar snacks and a decent pint and a garden and where you can take your dog in. And Cardiff was just awash with Brains pubs, and absolutely not to disrespect the success of Brains, but they were quite generic and you kind of knew what you were going to get going in. And we wanted to sort of provide this environment where you walked in and there'd be 5 different ales on every time, and you didn't, you always knew it was going to be good, but you didn't know what you were going to get. And to do that and to find places that would enable us to be a free house meant that we were looking at places that had been boarded up, that were being sold off by the breweries, that they didn't see as viable businesses anymore. So when we opened the Lansdowne in Canton, Canton now we look at and think, it's incredibly thriving, buoyant property market. But actually that side of Canton, when we opened the Lansdowne in 2012, people said, you must be mad. That's the rough end of Canton. You don't want to go there. And we were pretty narked about that, because we all lived in Canton, and we said, well, hang on, we're pretty sure this is going to be a success. And I knew it would be a success when estate agents started marketing houses saying near to the award-winning Lansdowne pub. And I think it has had an impact on helping to regenerate that area, because it attracts a certain type of person who wants to have that food and drink on their doorstep just outside of town. And so it's the same with the Grange. That had been boarded up for over a year. And in fact, I remember meeting the licensing police on site when we first bought the premises, and they said, we were really hoping this would be turned into flats. And I thought, that's a dreadful thing to say. This is one of only 2 remaining pubs in Grangetown, which had 6, 8, maybe more at one time. What an awful thing to say, that you're taking away those kind of community facilities. And he was very insistent, you'll have no end of trouble. It'll be drugs, drug dealing, fighting. We have had absolutely none of that. And I think you provide something that the community is proud of. Yes, I'm not saying that we're doing it all for philanthropic benefit, but you provide something that people want to come to and they respect it.
You're busy. You're the Chief Executive of Chwarae Teg. You and your husband run 3 restaurants, 2 young children. How do you both manage with all that work?
You can see how tired I look. It is busy. It is busy. There are times that we look at each other and say, are we mad? But I think we've both got this, well, if we don't do it, maybe someone else won't. And I think when it comes to my proper work, as I call it, which is, Chwarae Teg, that drive and ambition, I think, comes from a frustration and a concern that there's a lack of pace sometimes in Wales, a lack of people really wanting to push forward and make some big gains. And so I do think, if I sit back and, choose to have an easier life, which, perhaps we could do, I know I'll look on and be frustrated that things aren't happening in the way that I want to. So I'm sure there'll come a point where there's a straw that breaks the camel's back and we decide that enough's enough. But actually, we made that decision 2 years ago to consolidate our business interests. Let's just focus on the things that we're really passionate about. And at the moment, most of the time, we just about managed to get the balance right. Whether my kids would say that, I don't know.
My kids only ever knew me as a minister before this year, so they were quite used to it. We've recently had the Womenspire event, and looking to the future, how does an event like that help you to shape the change of the future? And in particular, what would you like to see happen over the next decade in terms of the work that Chwarae Teg does?
Well, we know these events are important because we can see how they've grown year on year. At our recent Women's Spire, it was bigger than ever before. It's the fourth one we've had. We had 550 people there, people from all walks of life, all parts of Wales, people from business, people from public sector, people who are volunteers. And the reason it matters is because we have to provide those role models, those real examples of ordinary women doing incredible things. And it's not about a reward ceremony. It's not about rewarding people who've achieved the top of their profession. It's about recognising the impact of the everyday things that women are doing. And that's important because those stories don't get told, because we're trying to turn an oil tanker of culture, which has for many, many decades, for many hundreds of years, overlooked the work that women have done, and overlooked the importance and the impact that they're having. So it might seem, well, you can't turn that tank around with one simple event. Of course you can't. But we want to create an army of women who are confident in speaking about their experiences, who feel they're part of something, who feel that they have solidarity with each other and feel confident to be themselves, whether they're working in an industry that's highly male-dominated or whether they're working in an industry which is heavily female-dominated but often overlooked and undervalued. You know, we need to start changing people's perceptions about the work that women do, and that's helpful for us all in the end. So that's one part of what I see contributing to real change. And I think I've always thought that with devolution in Wales, we can make much more of the opportunity of being a small country, much more of the ability to innovate, to be flexible, to do things differently, to try and maybe fail and then try something else. We should be able to do that better. We should be able to close the gaps in some of the kind of injustices that we see more quickly. So you and I have talked before about the aspiration of to have Wales as a world leader for gender equality. When I said that originally, and I'm sure when you've talked about it in the past, people think, oh, well, that's just a sort of a slogan or a pie in the sky. I genuinely think it's achievable. And if as we have recently, talked to people from Iceland, from Sweden, from Denmark, from those Nordic nations who always score highly on the international benchmarks around equality, they are not so different to us in terms of how they go about it. And that's where I think that drive, ambition and leadership is absolutely crucial, because without those things, everybody will be too timid, will be afraid of getting it wrong. And I think we need to be bolder. I don't mind saying Wales is going to be a world leader for gender equality in the next 20 years and failing. What if we just fall 2 years short? That's a huge success.
And what does the future hold for Cerys Furlong?
Well, I'm quite happy where I am at the moment. My youngest is about to start school in September, and I feel like we're in a good place as a family. Whatever the future holds, I can't imagine doing something that I wasn't passionate about. And, you know, I'm hugely lucky to have had a career so far where most of the things that I've done, I've been really passionate about. I don't know how you get out of bed every morning otherwise.
Cerys Furlong, Chief Executive of Chwarae Teg, thanks very much for joining us today.